and welcome back to my channel, where I am in the process of revisiting some of my earlier class-related videos. In this video, we will be advancing our Cleric Class character that we created in the previous video. And I will be advancing that character from level 1, which is what it is now, going through level 2 all the way through to level 10. But then we will cover the remaining levels in a follow-up video, which would complete the series. The more recent versions of Fantasy Grounds Unity now include a much more polished off character wizard that will allow you to more easily level up a given class for a character. Additionally, many of the features will be automatically set up for you now and configured within your character's action sheet, based on the best configuration recommended by the community for use within combat situations, but there are some exceptions to that rule. So let's go ahead and level up our character here so that I can show you all of those little areas that just need a little bit of a tweak to make them just right for your character. Because this is the first time that we have leveled our character, what I'm going to want to do is click on this magnifying glass on the main tab here. That's going to bring open a level advancement window. Right here at the upper right, almost upper right, is a level up button. What we want to do is click on that. And that's going to open up the character wizard. At Cleric level 2, there are going to be a couple of things that are going to happen. The first is that your character is going to gain an extra spell slot. And what that means is that you can now also prepare one additional spell, but the two are kind of linked but not quite, and I'll get into that in a bit. The other thing is you only have access to cantrips and level 1 spells at this time, which means that you will only be able to select a new level 1 spell to be able to set up and prepare. Now, I didn't really cover the spellcasting component within the previous video, and that's primarily because of how it works and how it's associated with the Divine Domain. So I'm going to use this video to provide you a little bit more detail, and your cleric will be able to prepare a total number of spells per day that is equal to the Wisdom modifier, which is another reason why that stat is important, and your level. So for this particular character, it's going to be equal to 5 because we have a Wisdom of +3, and our character is now going to be level 2 once we commit these changes. When you advance a character within the character wizard, you will increment it utilizing this button here. And then various tabs will become important over the lifetime of your character. In this case, we want to jump to the spells one and select the level 1 spell listing here. I'm going to go ahead and add in the bless spell for this one. Any spell that your character already has in place, regardless whether it's a cantrip, level 1, or higher level spell, when you're going through the process of leveling up your character, it's going to always call it an innate spell, which means you can't remove it from this list. You can do so manually from the character sheet, but you can't remove it from this list. So these totals here are actually going to be a little incorrect for you. For instance, we're only able to add 1 new spell, but it says 1 of 5 here. What you need to do is calculate how many innate spells would equal the number of spells that your character currently has. So in this case, it would be 4 level 1 spells. And then you add that to the value of the spell that you just gained. So we added 1 more level 1 spell. That would give us a total of 5 spells. So that's how you have to calculate this out. I don't know why it's done this way, but it is for the time being. So what I'm going to do, I'll cover Channel Divinity here in a bit, but I'm going to commit this change because all I wanted to show was how to add a spell through the character wizard here in this particular case. So I'm going to save our character again. We're going to see a summary of all of the changes that occur related to our character, and our character sheet is going to gain the new spells. I'm going to stretch this down a little bit, and what we will see is bless right here. Now you might be asking, how do you prepare a spell? And I'm going to show you that. If you look here, you'll see that these 3 cantrips have an icon that is here. This is just an indicator to say to the Dungeon Master that, hey, I'm going to be casting guidance. That's because cantrips by default are always prepared. To prepare level 1 or higher spells, you actually have to change the mode from standard to preparation. And it's always going to drop into either combat or standard anytime your character gets a new spell here. So you have to always make sure that you flip it to preparation. To prepare a spell, all you do is click this checkbox here. And then once that's done, you can switch this back to standard or into combat mode, and you will now have a clickable option here. A lot of these are going to have effects that are going to be hidden underneath these magnifying glasses here. But when you switch into an actions mode, all of those effects are going to be exposed, or all of those rolls or damage or even healing elements are all going to be exposed so that you can make use of them without having to click on this particular magnifying glass to gain access to them. If you want a little bit more context about what they do, then you can expand it out, much like I've done here, and figure out exactly what it is going to give you. I want to show you how I calculated how many spells my character could actually go through and prepare. When you go into spellcasting at the bottom of the class information sheet, you will see a preparation and casting spell section. This is where you're going to learn how your character learns spells when they gain new spells, not necessarily the spell slots, but when they gain new spells, and what your total number of spells that you can prepare is. In our case, our character makes use of the wisdom modifier in conjunction with the character level. So in this case, it's level 2, which is why we are able to prepare 5 spells. What that means is that if our wisdom modifier here does increase, we do get to select another spell. And clerics always can max out the preparation spells based off of the listing of spells that are here. You don't have to go find a spell and write it into a spell book, and then you have the ability to use it. Clerics always have access to these spells, with the exception of the cantrips. Those are a little bit special. Also at level 2, your character is going to be given a new domain-based feature, and I'll get to Channel Divinity in a minute. This feature I'm not going to be covering in this particular video, simply because I will cover those in the domain-specific videos. This is strictly going to be for the base class. So if you want to understand how that particular feature works, you're going to want to watch that video as well. So what is Channel Divinity? Well, in this case, it's a grouping of specific features. So if I go and expand out Channel Divinity here, you can see the details for it. One of the default things that you get is the ability to turn undead. And we're going to cover that because it's already been added to our character sheet. And this is a feature that all clerics gain. Every cleric gains the ability to turn undead. But it is also something, because of the way that Channel Divinity works, that is shared across other features you're going to be gaining through your domain. Turn Undead is a feature of the Channel Divinity that all clerics gain, as I've already stated. And what it does is it will allow your cleric to force any undead creature who is within 30 feet of where your character is standing and can hear and see your character to make a wisdom-based saving throw or be turned. In 5th edition, turned has 2 meanings. 1, they run away, or 2, they are outright destroyed. At this level, you get the ability to make them run away. Later on, when you gain another feature that expands on what Turn Undead can do, then you gain the ability to start being able to destroy them. When a creature is turned, they can't approach your character, and they must try to run away from them if it is all possible. They also lose the ability to make use of reactions and will focus entirely on getting away from your character, or if they can't, on dodging any incoming attacks. This means that during their turn, the only thing that they can do while turned is make use of the dash action to run away, or the dodge action if they're pinned and can't get away. Unfortunately, however, Turn Undead does have a usage limitation. At this level, you will only be able to use this once per rest. And what that means is that your character will need to complete a short or a long rest in order to be able to regain the ability to cast Turn Undead again. At Cleric level 6, the number of uses increases to 2, and at Cleric level 18, it increases to 3. But, as I said earlier, due to the way that Channel Divinity shares a few things, what we're going to want to do is create a power group that is specific and unique to Channel Divinity so that we can combine all of the features that you're going to gain from your domain that work off of Channel Divinity into one group and all share the number of uses. So to do that, I'm going to take this existing effect and simply call this Channel Divinity. I shouldn't say effect, this is actually your power group. I'm going to remove the old one, and then what I'm going to do is pop this open. And the reason being is I want to make a few adjustments to the contents of these settings here. So I'm going to leave this as an ability because it's not a spell, it's an ability. I'm going to set this to Wisdom because that is the stat that all Channel Divinity based features function off of. And I'm going to set this to 1 rest. And the reason why I'm going to do that is that's now going to give us this usage pip right here. When your character uses Turn Undead, you would click this pip and this whole power group and this ability here will simply disappear from your action page. Don't worry, however, when your character completes a short or long rest, this will return. So it's not permanently gone once used, much like a potion might be, for example. I'm going to show you how this works in a combat-based situation. What I'm going to do is select the vampire, the zombies, and everything else here. Unlike earlier editions, you do have the ability to turn more powerful undead. It just happens to be slightly harder to do. There used to be a limitation on how powerful an undead creature your character could turn at specific levels. With 5th edition, that now comes down to when they're destroyed outright, rather than just simply turned. So it makes it a little bit more survivable if you bump up against a vampire and get a very lucky roll and cause them to run away. With all of the undead selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of this actions form here, if you will, or display, so that I can simply gain access to both the dice roll and the effect. Because this is something that can affect multiple undead creatures in one roll, all you have to do is select them all and then roll once. And it's going to automatically tell you who fails and who succeeds, and automatically remove from your target list those who manage to succeed on the saving throw. And in this particular case, Skeleton 8 and 11, as well as Zombie 10, all failed their saving throw. That means that you can simply click on this particular effect here, and they will be turned for a duration of 10 turns. From a Dungeon Master's point of view, what that means is that Zombie 10, Skeleton 8, and Skeleton 11 will do their best to run away from your character, and they will dash to do that. So they're going to use both their movement turn and their action turn to move. However, let's say that Zombie 10 here is cornered, meaning that they have no squares that they can pass through and not pass through something that would be friendly to your character. That means that they're cornered, and when they're cornered, all they can do is dodge. So that is how Turn Undead works. Now that I've used it, I have to tick this pip, and when I'm in combat mode, you will see that that now disappears from your list, meaning that the character is going to have to complete a long rest or short rest in order to regain that ability and have it come back. Before I move on, there is one additional thing that I would just want to show, and that's literally how do you cast spells. It's not that hard to do. There are going to be a couple of situations that you will have available to you in respect to actual spell casting. The first is that you will have access to all of these effects. Anything that's going to trigger an attack roll or saving throw is going to have a cast option. And what you do is you select the target if it happens to be a single target, or multiple targets if you're able to attack multiple targets, and then simply click this button to force a roll. So Guiding Bolt, I believe, is only a single weapon. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. I'm going to make that roll. In this case, that's a hit. And now I can do some damage. And there's also an effect that comes into play. So I'm going to roll the damage. A little bit more powerful than I thought. And then I'm going to add that effect to it. Now, when this creature attacks, or is attacked rather, anyone who attacks it is going to gain advantage because it's a much brighter target to hit. Next, you will have things that are beneficial to party members. So let's say, for example, that we're on the same side as this adult green dragon. Right now, it's not possible, but let's say that we are. And what you want to do is give them the Bless benefit. What you would do is simply drag and drop that onto them, and then it would apply the effect there. But what happens if you want to heal them? Well, the same thing. All you would do is drag and drop the heal effect here. It will roll a dice and apply any healing that comes into play. So you can see that spellcasting in Fantasy Grounds is not an overly complicated concept. Other ones like this, Spare the Dying, they're meant to do something very specific, and as such, they will not necessarily require some form of dice roll, or do any damage, or require any healing, or apply any effects of any kind. Although Spare the Dying actually technically does do one thing, and that is stabilize someone who happens to be dying on the field of battle. So theoretically, there should be a stabilize effect that comes into play here. At Cleric level 3, your character is going to gain access to level 2 spells, as you can see here. We will also gain a total of 3 new spell slots, 2 for level 2 and 1 for level 1. However, we're still only going to gain the addition of 1 new spell that we can prepare, and that's because of the spellcasting requirement that states we only gain a spell per level. And it isn't that you're gaining a new spell, It's actually that you're gaining the ability to prepare an additional spell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and level this character up and then show you what that looks like. Again, we're gaining some additional spells here. I'm going to go ahead and add in a level 2 spell. So you will see that there's now a level 2 button here that shows you the listing of all level 2 spells that you have access to. And this list will be a combination of all modules that your character has loaded. So in this particular case, I am going to select Old Person for now. And because there is nothing else that I have to do, I'm going to go ahead and commit this. And when I go to our action sheet here, I will now see that we have a level 2 spell slot. I'll just minimize these for the time being. But we don't have that little icon over here to indicate to us that it is a prepared spell. So you still have to go ahead and do that. Technically, as a cleric, you could theoretically go to the spells listing here, pull out all of the clerical spells that are specific to levels 1 and 2, add them to your character sheet, and then simply toggle which ones that you have prepared. That is legitimately possible for your character to do. I don't recommend doing it because you will end up with a very full list here, and it can sometimes get hard to search through all of the items that are in that list to look for what you're looking for. At the top here, you will now see that you have a total of 4 first level spell slots and 2 second level spell slots. And any spell here, such as Cure Wounds, for example, that has the ability to be cast at a higher level spell can consume a higher level spell slot and gain additional functionality. So you can see here at higher levels, you can make use of this and gain an additional dice as part of that healing. So instead of doing just 1d8 for your roll plus your spellcasting modifier, you could do 2d8 for any healing that you wish to do if you use a second level spell slot. What can't happen, however, is that a level 2 spell cannot use a level 1 spell slot. So only spells that are of a lower level can upgrade to a higher level if their ability states or if their description states that it's possible to do. At Cleric level 4, our character is going to gain our first ability score improvement. And I'm going to explain that a little bit because it's going to take a couple of levels in order to ensure that I get a full explanation for this. In addition to that, our character is also going to gain an additional spell. So in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and select Silence. That would be this spell here. And then I'm going to go back to the ability score improvement selection. One thing that you need to be aware of is that as your character gains these ability score improvements, you have to make a choice. In fact, there's a total of 2.5 choices, if you will. And this relates to the exclamation marks that you see here at the top. When we advanced our level from 3 to 4, the class level here sort of got this red exclamation mark. So did the feats panel. And what I mean by 2.5 choices is that you have to choose either an ability score increase, which in itself has 2 choices that you have to make, or a feature. For this example, because I want to showcase something, I'm going to select the ability score increase. At level 8, I will add a feat, just so that you can see what that looks like. As soon as I click that, I now have to go to the stats page here, and I want to bump my wisdom score up by 2 points. And this is where your second choice comes into play. You have the ability to select 2 ability scores, but when you do that, you're going to reduce this +2 bonus that you're adding to wisdom to a +1 bonus to wisdom and a +1 bonus to whatever particular stat you decide to choose. So if I chose Constitution, 1, you'll see that the selection goes away, but 2, you will see that this only goes up by 1 point and this goes up by 1 point. If you decide that is not what you want to do, all you have to do is expand this back out and then deselect the stat that you want to remove from that list and then select another one or leave it so that your character gains the +2 on wisdom. In this case, this is what I want. And because I selected the ability score improvement, there won't be any feats here that I can go through and select. So I'm going to go ahead and commit this change. Now that our wisdom score has gone up by 2 points here, our bonus has also gone up by 1 point. That now means that in addition to the 1 spell that we would have gained because of our level increase, we are able to add a second spell due to this +1 modifier increase. So instead of just having Silence be the only spell that we can add to our character, we can now go ahead and add another spell to this character. Now, there is one thing I want to point out. When I was doing this in a test-based scenario, silence did not show up when I made an ability score improvement and then chose to commit that after I had selected the spell. In this case, it worked. So just be cognizant of that. That might be an issue that is still outstanding with Fantasy Grounds, but if it works perfectly fine, I wouldn't worry about it. Now, to gain access to the spell, because we don't really have access to the character wizard, we could theoretically pop open the character wizard and then go ahead and add that spell. But an easier approach is just simply to scroll down on your class sheet, open up the spellcasting option here, and then expand out the spells list. Now, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and add in a second level spell, and I'm just going to drag and drop spiritual weapon onto our character sheet. Then I'm going to make sure that I set this to preparation, and then go ahead and prepare both of those spells. I missed something when we went through and leveled up at 4th level, and that was that we needed to add an additional cantrip. If you also happen to do that, like I did, and didn't select it while you had the opportunity within the character wizard, what you can simply do is go down to spellcasting, open it up, open up the cleric's listing, and then just add in a new cantrip from this particular screen here. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop light into there, and then we're ready to go. Although I should also state that when our wisdom modifier increased by 1 point, so did this saving throw, as well as any saving throws that made use of the wisdom stat and any ability scores that made use of the wisdom modifier here as well. And it's not going to affect just those that you're proficient in, it's going to affect any of them that make use of wisdom. At Cleric level 5, we're going to be gaining a couple of things for our character. One is going to be one new spell, which is going to be a regular trend if you haven't already picked up on that. But in this case, we are also unlocking the ability to gain access to level 3 spells. So now we get to choose a level 3 spell. I'm going to go ahead, advance our character, pop over to the spells table here, and then choose our spell. And let's see. I think I'm going to go with Mass Healing Word in this case. Yes, this is a Cleric of the Knowledge domain, but I'm not focusing on the domain, so I'm not necessarily focusing on picking spells that make sense for that domain. And then I'm going to commit that change. This is also the level where our character gains their first proficiency bonus increase. And what that means is that things like saving throws that your character is proficient in, skills that your character is proficient in, so anything that has a star or double star in it, as well as any saving throws that make use of that as part of the calculation, they're all going to increase by 1 point, which means it's now harder for a particular creature to resist, for example, turn undead. Our character also gains the Destroy Undead feature, and this is the feature I was talking about a little bit earlier that enhances the Turn Undead feature. What this does is that when your character makes use of the Turn Undead feature, and a particular creature fails their saving throw, if they are under this specific challenge rating or are equal to it, they will be immediately destroyed, and anything that happens to be higher than it will simply be turned. So if we look in the combat tracker here, the skeletons and the zombie are a 1/4 challenge rating creature. The vampire, on the other hand, is a challenge rating of 13. What this means is that skeleton 11, skeleton 8, and zombie 10 here, when they failed their saving throw, if you had cast Turn Undead at this level, they would have outright been destroyed, although Fantasy Grounds doesn't automatically pick that up. And just to show you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to retarget all of these creatures again, and then force them to make another saving throw. They all failed their saving throw in this particular case, which is perfect, because now it's going to allow me to demonstrate this. All of our creatures that failed are now going to be turned. So we get to apply the turn effect, and excuse the double turn effect here. That's going to change in a moment. And what this means is that the vampire, the skeleton, and the zombies are all going to do their best to run away. But now there's an exception. Anything that happens to have a 1/2 challenge rating or lower, which is equal to what the zombies and the skeletons are, the dungeon master is just going to simply outright destroy them. So this is what the end result will actually be in respect to that. You will see 4 creatures that are dying and 1 creature that is still around. Technically, the Dungeon Master would then remove them from the combat tracker, but because I want to keep them around for demonstration purposes, I'm not going to do that just yet. But because this is a feature that modifies an existing feature and increases its capabilities, we don't need to add this to the combat tracker. You just have to, to our action sheet. You just have to periodically reference it when you're going through and actually turning the undead and asking the Dungeon Master, hey, anything that happens to be a 1/2 challenge rating or lower is going to be destroyed. You could also do something like this, where you go 1/2 CR to give you a clue that anything under that value or equal to that value should be destroyed. Now, before we move on, I'm just going to go ahead and finalize the preparation of that particular spell. At Cleric level 6, our character is once again gaining access to additional spells and is increasing the number of uses of our Channel Divinity feature. So I'm going to go ahead and simply pop through this. I'm going to select another level 3 spell. Doesn't really matter which one, but I'll do Daylight for now. And now what we can do is make a minor adjustment to our Channel Divinity feature here. Now, before I do, you might notice that there's now a second Channel Divinity feature here. I'm not going to cover that in this particular video. This has been added by the domain, which in this case is the knowledge domain. But ideally, just briefly, what you would do is you would change the power group that this feature is now in, because it's automatically going to add it to this, to be the same power group as Channel Divinity so that they link, because they do share uses. But I will be demonstrating that in the video specific to the domain, so don't worry about that. You'll see how that works. All we have to do is pop open this power group modifier tab here, and then just change that from a 1 to a 2. And you can see that we now have 2 usage tips here, which means that we now can execute this twice before we have to complete a short or long rest to be able to regain those uses. At Cleric level 7, we get a very simple leveling up process, because all we're gaining in this particular case is the addition of a spell, but we are gaining access to level 4 spells. So we can go ahead and add in that level 4 spell here now and make the adjustment and save that to our character sheet. Now, before moving on, I just got to make sure that I go through and prepare all of the spells that we have added thus far. Level 8, on the other hand, is a little bit more complicated because we're gaining our next ability score improvement in addition to our quote-unquote next free spell. In this particular case, though, I'm going to select a feat rather than an ability score improvement to show you what it looks like when you add a feat. When you select this, again, the choice is going to go away from here, but you don't have any stats here that you will be modifying. What you have to do is pop over to this feats window, and you will see a listing of all of the available feats provided by all of the supplements that you have loaded in Fantasy Grounds. You can safely click on the dragon icon here, or whatever icon happens to be here, in order to get information about the feat before you choose it. And then when you're ready, you simply select the feat, and then it will make that choice, add that, and update the tab so that it shows you that you're essentially ready to go. In this particular case, if you decide to choose it, you just select this again, and then select a different one, although I want healer in this case, and then move on. Before we leave, however, we still need to add our additional spell. So I'm going to go ahead and add in banishment in this particular case. Once I commit that, we will now see that under our ability score, we now have, or tab rather, we now have the healer feat. In this particular case, this healer feat does have a couple of things that we could theoretically make as an action here. I'm going to just simply, before I minimize this window, I'm going to prepare that. And then I'm just going to drag this into place because I want this to be thrown into its own power group. I'm going to make sure that I modify this so that it's called feat. And that will set it up so that the healer, or it should have anyway. Oh, it moved Dwarven Resilience. Whoops. That's not right. All right. This is traits. There we go. I'm going to get rid of that. So this is now feats. This is where healer is. All of the things that we would normally have to do are already there, so we don't need to worry about making any additional adjustments. At character level 9, we are gaining access to level 5 spells. In addition, our proficiency bonus is going up by 1 point. I'm going to go ahead and advance this level, and beyond the spell addition itself, there's really nothing here that actually adds any level of complexity to the process of going through and dealing with the character level up. You just have to make sure that we go ahead and prepare that spell, and then it frees it up for being able to get used here. And the final level that we're going to do in this video is level 10. And this is where our character gains their next class-based feature called Divine Intervention, which we'll look at here in a moment. This is on top of an increase in the number of cantrips that our cleric will now be able to cast, as well as the number of spells that our character can now prepare. So I'm going to go ahead and level this character up and bring us to level 10. I'm going to make sure that I choose a cantrip first, and I'm going to add Thaumaturgy. And then I'm just simply going to add another 5th level spell here. I'm going to make that Mass Cure Wounds. And then I'm going to commit this change. Divine Intervention is an interesting one because it's kind of like an early wish spell, but with a little bit of a limitation when it comes to your usage of it early on. As an action, so this means that you're using it during a combat-based situation, your character can now implore their deity to intervene in the situation. When you do this, your character is going to have to roll a percentile die. And what that means is that you want to right-click on this D10 and select percentile. That's going to add that to your cursor here. And then you're going to want to roll it inside of the chat box. You roll it anywhere else, it's not going to show up. You're going to want to roll it here. We succeeded. And I'll explain why in a moment. When you request your deity to intervene, you are going to want to think along the lines of a spellcasting related request. And the reason why I say that is because that's sort of what the Dungeon Master is kind of restricted to do in reference to what they can grant. So think of something like a mass heal spell or a mass resurrection spell if your party's completely wiped out, or greater restoration spell. Something along those lines. If you're the only one left, you can implore your god to intervene and resurrect all of your party members. If you succeed, which we did in this particular case. Now, why did I say that? The reason why is that the roll that you must end up with in relation to your percentile die has to be equal to or lower than your character level. In this case, our character is level 10, which means we succeeded in this call. So, if at this point my request was, I would like all of my characters to be resurrected, then at that point, the Dungeon Master would do something similar along those lines. It's still up to the Dungeon Master to determine exactly how the god is going to interpret that request and then apply those effects after that. If it's a mass heal, chances are the god's going to grant that. If it's a mass resurrection or a mass greater restoration, there's still a good chance, because you're imploring your god to do that, they might feel like it's something that they want to do. Therefore, they might go ahead and do it. However, Bane might resurrect those characters, but not in the way that you might think. Having said that, once a god decides to intervene, there is now a usage limitation associated with the feature. You cannot use it again until 7 full days have gone past. That means that if at noon on day 1, you chose to request for an intervention and your god does decide to make that intervention, then you would have to wait a full 7 days plus 1 minute before your character could actually go ahead and use it again. If the god does not intervene, meaning that we rolled an 11 or higher on the percentile die, then you can rest for 24 hours and then make the request again. So it requires that kind of duration. So you can only do this as a once per day. It's one of the few things where it states it's once per day. That means it's a full 24-hour period between each call. The final thing that I want to mention about this particular feature is that once you hit level 20, once your character has reached Cleric level 20, they will no longer need to make that roll, as the request will be automatically granted. Thus, you will then have to wait the normal 7-day period before you can make an additional request. And that completes the process of going from level 2 through to level 10 in relation to the Cleric class itself. I know I didn't cover a couple of things in the creation video, which I'm hoping that I've covered sufficiently enough here in this particular video. And then when we get to the domain specific videos for the domains I haven't yet covered, then I'll be sure to include a little bit more detail around that so that you can see how the domain functionality ties into that. However, before I can even get to that, I do have to do the level 11 through to level 20 video in relation to this particular class. So thank you for watching. I hope you found it useful and informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.